Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Drunk Friend podcast. As always, we're your host. I'm Travis. That's Alex, and we have a pretty good guest coming up. But first, let's see what's going on with Alex. Alex, Taekwondo, Saber Wolf, what are these things?
First of all, let's get this out of the way. We got one of the best guests we've ever had on here. It is the gaming historian, Norman Caruso. We're going to get out of the way as quickly as we can, so you can hear that. So I will just say that real quick. What did you say? Oh,
they're your videos.
Taekwondo and Saber Wolf, the things that I've been working on. Taekwondo is a very good, what do you call it? Super Nintendo game that is...
What do you say you do here?
No. You got to say it right. What would you say you do here?
Right.
You got to say it with like the proper inflect. I'm sorry.
The Fargo accent?
You.
Yeah.
The Fargo accent makes it better. Anyway, Taekwondo is a Super Famicom game that never came out in the U.S. because Taekwondo apparently isn't popular enough to warrant a 16-bit one-on-one fighting game. It's really good. I wouldn't say... Actually, no, I take that back. It's not really good. I think it's fairly solid. What I like about it is that it pays homage, so to speak, to the Korean... Korea invented Taekwondo.
Mm-hmm.
A Japanese company made the game. So they ended up making the game in two languages, Korean and Japanese. And it's like, okay, good lip service. And, it's a really different kind of fighting game where you press the R button to change your stance. It's almost realistic in a way, in kind of a cartoonish way. It's hard to explain, but without seeing
less like
footage of it.
There's no like fatalities, and it's not like over the top with Hadoukens. Like it's more down to earth. Is
right?
What you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, it's very much down to earth. There's no Hadoukens. There's no special move. I mean, there are special moves, but there's no like supernatural special moves, I guess I'll say. But
yeah, it's one of those games that just by the title alone, I'm just immediately not interested because it's so basic. Like if it were like, Jim Bob's Dragon Fighter game, I'd be more interested. But if there was a game just called Karate or something like that, I'm probably not as interested. But and that's my fault because this game, when you showed the video, I was like, wow, this really does. I don't want to use the word hidden gem around here, but I mean, this is pretty nice. This seems like one I would totally.
No, it's hidden gem. You gotta say it like in the Hollywood voice, with the Hollywood trailer voice. Hidden gem this summer. We should.
Yeah,
this summer.
Right. Yeah, I would have glanced over
Hercules,
but it would have been right in front of me, and it would have been worth my time. I think so. Good on you for finding it. Or somebody requested
it. Was a Patreon request. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I take no credit for finding it. But we also have Saber Wolf, another Patreon request, because that game is also a very strange... Not only is it a weird game, but has kind of a weird backstory where it was originally a ZX Spectrum.
Get it through your head.
No, it's the Brits will have my head if I don't say
Z through your head. Just, you have to say it.
There you go. That's a good slogan for your noggin. That didn't work at all. That was terrible. That didn't rhyme. It was terrible. Saber Wolf is one of those weird games that has like kind of a weird backstory where it's actually a game that has a weird backstory. It goes all the way back to Rare in its early infancy. It had some really stupid name like Ultimate Play the Game. Yeah. No, it wasn't just Ultimate, it was Ultimate Play the Game.
Yikes.
What kind of name is that?
Is that a sentence or a name? That's what you're left asking. What's going on here? Did someone write down the wrong thing where title was supposed to go?
Yeah, I know, right? Like on the form.
Yeah, on the LLC file, they're like, I don't know. Ultimate is a game. I don't know.
Whoops. But yeah, it's but the thing is that it ends up being a pretty interesting game because when people think Saber Wolf, I think most people think of Saber Wolf, the wolf from Killer Instinct, and it turns out that took its name from a game from 1984 that Rare developed way back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a kind of a pretty interesting arcade style, like run around and, a Pac-Man style game. Like, only you actually go after enemies and defeat enemies and that sort of stuff.
Cool.
It's a maze style game. But the Game Boy Advance game has been completely reinvented with Donkey Kong Country style pre-rendered graphics. It's pretty clear that it's made for kids and that it's made for a specific audience. It's made as a portable game. And yeah, it's fine for what it is. It accomplishes its goals for what it set out to do, but as far as like an across the board recommendation, no.
Gotcha. Well, that is interesting. That's one of those games where sometimes the history of it outweighs the fun of it, and that's okay.
Yeah,
that's all right. My video this past week was on Puzznic, and yeah, I know it's a hard sell to get people to watch a video about a puzzle game. I get it, but I thought it was a fun game, and I'm just here to make videos about games, And so Puzznic was one that I've always liked. I remember playing it with my dad a few times, and he really enjoyed it. He was a big puzzle guy. He was all about the puzzles, just a whiz at puzzle games, and so I couldn't really get it off my mind, and I was like, I'm going to dig into this one and make a little video about it because I do like it. It's 2 games in one. It has over 320 different puzzles. It's quality. It's very overlooked for an NES game. I mean, it got ported to the ZX Spectrum, to all of them. All of the spectrums.
I'd never heard of it before.
Really?
Before it popped up on my phone, I'd never heard of Puzznic. I was like, "The hell is this?"
Interesting. Yeah.
What is this? Like, what is the spam I've got on my phone? I've got Puzznic.
It's got an arcade port, and in the arcade port, I think if you remove certain tiles, it unveils a scantily clad lady. If you're into that. If you're not into that, that's fine too.
In the comments of when I first visited on. Early this morning, I was like, oh, okay, all right, fine. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because Japan or something, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I knew about when I looked up the game, but I just left that detail out because I was like, I don't really want to get into that. Somebody in the comments will mention it. We get into that discussion later with Norm where it's like, we don't have to include everything about the game in the video.
Exactly,
so
yes.
I chose to leave that detail out, but of course somebody was there to rescue that detail from the grave and make it very visible to everyone at the top of the comments, but that's okay. So anyway, we got emails.
We do?
Yeah. I'll go first here. We got one from Michael. He says, hey guys, I've been a fan of SNES Drunk for around 5 years and started following DrunkFriend earlier this year when this podcast came out. It seriously takes a load off my week when I see new content published. Awesome. The question I have for you is regarding time management. Do you plan a couple days a week to work on content, or do you prefer to work on a project a little bit every day? I have a hard time finding the correct balance for me and was curious what works for both of you. Thank you for reading this and keep up the good work. Sincerely, Michael Wilson. It's a good question.
It's a good question. I'm not going to lie, when I first saw this email, when I first took a glance at it, I thought it said Michael Wilbon. And I was like, oh no, not Michael Wilbon. But yeah, that's a sports reference for you sport folk.
Wilbon's a huge listener. It's only a matter of time before he emails.
I'm sure. We just got to talk about Northwestern and the Cubs and all that Chicago crap. But anyway, this is an interesting question for me personally because I used to have a very strict routine for years and years because I've been doing this SNES Drunk gig for a long, long time, since 2013. Mm-hmm. There was at one point where I was like 11 videos ahead, or I'm sorry, 11 weeks ahead, which means like I was like 22 videos ahead at one point. And it got to the point where I got so detached from the stuff that was coming out and the feedback I was getting, and it seemed kind of weird. And I was just like, all right, this needs to kind of come closer together because it was...
Oh, like you would release a video and then 10 weeks later somebody would leave a comment and you're like, what are you talking about? I got you.
It was like, yeah, exactly. It was like over 2 months later. I'm like, what are you talking about? And it was very strange. And now I'm just the opposite. I'm really enjoying the immediate feedback I get from somebody I just worked on the other day. And I'm finding out that this isn't that hard to write something, get the footage for it, get the music for it, all this stuff, edit everything, and just crank it out right before it comes out, and then get that immediate feedback. It's kind of addictive. I'm not going to lie. It's pretty cool. It's and the only reason I say that is because I've been on the other end of the spectrum, where I've been way ahead, and now I kind of like being on the other end, and I'm sure I'm gonna slingshot back to the other end because it's kind of stressful being on this end of the spectrum.
I would think, yeah.
It's kind of stressful, but at the same time, it's like, who cares? Like, so what? It doesn't matter.
That's the thing. Like, you ended up skipping a few weeks over the summer, and I think that was the first time you'd done it. And it comes down to like a lot of the, unless you're making your living off YouTube, which some people do, if you depend on that, that's one thing. But like, if it's just a hobby, why add the stress of being like, I have to make a video come out on this Thursday or else? Like, that's just in your head. That's just you doing that to you. You can rely. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
No, that's just it. This is just a hobby for me. It's not any kind of, like freaking job or anything like that. I guess it kind of is to a certain extent because I do get Patreon requests for certain games like Saberwolf, which is fine because I like finding out about games that I never would have known about had somebody not told me about them. That works for me. If that's my job, good. I like that job. But, at the same time, like, if somebody recommends a game that's like, hey, what about, Bill Lambert's Combat Basketball? No, not happening. Go piss up a rope.
Yes, all the way up.
Piss up a rope again, and then piss up a rope a third time.
3 ropes of piss. Yes, I agree. For me, I am very different. I don't ever want to be the guy that's making it a week out because just the idea of that stresses me out. So doing it would be awful. But I try to keep like a month out. I don't do as many videos as Alex, and I engross myself, and I have 32 other podcasts that I'm doing as well. So I sort of have that creative energy funneled everywhere else. To balance it out a little bit. So we're not too different, you and I. But I definitely think. I like about 4 weeks out. I was doing a really far out, and like you, I did feel detached from the feedback because somebody would be like, man, your sound here is a little messed up. I'm like, well, I do it for the next 7 videos. So, and it's not, sorry, I'm not, that feedback is not going to.
Get used to it for the next 2 months.
Yeah, it's not going into the wheelhouse for a little while. So I've shortened the gap a little bit to just being 2 or 3 ahead and feeling comfortable with that. And that's nice and comfy. I don't feel threatened, but I also feel engaged with the work.
I think that's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
I think just 2 or 3 weeks ahead is a nice spot to be in because it gives you just enough cushion to correct things without feeling overwhelmed. At least that's my opinion.
I agree.
That's how I've grown to that. Yeah. So the next email we've got is from Mr. Toasty.
All right.
Not sure if that's a Mortal Kombat reference.
No, that's his real name.
Not.
I don't know.
That's his real name. Toasty or Mr. Powdered Toast Man. Greetings and salutations, gamers, drunks, and citizens of the cosmos. Big fan, Mr. Toasty here. I love the show. It's a great distraction from the mindless drudgery that is my job. I'm sorry about your job, Mr. Toasty.
Sucks, Toasty.
I caught the SNES Drunk on YouTube about a year or so back and have been a faithful follower ever since. Parenthetical, don't worry, I'm now following the NES Friend 2.
Ooh, good, thank God.
Knowing that Mr. Drunk is a fellow Misty, he's talking about Mystery Science Theater 3000, I was wondering what his thoughts were on the Manos video game, and if he could make a video game based on another Mystery Science Theater episode, which one would he pick? In that vein, Mr. Friend, which movie from the 80s and early 90s do you feel missed their opportunity to be a good or spectacularly awful NES game? Anyway, even though you two sober up faster every time I say it, this is Mr. Toasty reminding you to be excellent to each other and party on, dudes. P.S. My drink of choice is Kentucky Bourbon Barrel Ale.
Cheers to that.
And cheers to Mr. Toasty. And he's given me some inside baseball stuff here when it comes to Manos, because I have played the Manos video game. It's fine. It works. I remember it gives me the opportunity to share a very niche, pigeonholed anecdote.
Okay.
Because my sister, once, back when we had our Compact Presario, which was gifted to us back in 1994. It was either a 386 or a 486. I want to say 486. we had a Manos screensaver on that computer, which played the haunting Manos theme. Or, I'm sorry, Torgo. It played the haunting Torgo theme every time the mouse went untouched after, 10 minutes or so.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody that's listening that knows Mystery Science Theater and Manos the Hands of Fate knows what I'm talking about. Travis does not, which means that I need to talk more about Mystery Science Theater. The game that I wish had a MST game, or MST game probably would be Space Mutiny. I think that's the obvious answer. Just because I want the opportunity to play as Buff Splink Flank. Or Big McLarge Huge.
Oh, yes, please.
Buff or Meat Beef Broth, or any of those ridiculous names. Final Sacrifice would also be a great RPG adventure style game. Devil Doll would be another dumb game. I don't know. I'm just naming episodes now.
You seem to be, yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, I represent the majority in that I have no idea anything that you just said. But I'm glad that you and Mr. Toasty are getting along fine. That's great. When it comes to 80s and early 90s movies that I think could have been fun on the NES, or at least interesting, I kind of gravitate toward the Neverending Story. I wonder how that would have gone. Nice little adventure.
Oh, that would have been perfect.
There's already some sort of video gamey aspects to how that world works, and I think that would be fun.
That's a great one, because when I think of that, I think of the Willow arcade game. Made by Capcom. Mm-hmm. Imagine that with Never-Ending Story. Mm-hmm. I think that would have worked really well.
For sure, yeah.
For me, it's Die Hard.
There is an NES Die Hard game.
It needs to be better.
It does. No, I agree with that.
It needs an arcade game. I screw NES. It needs an arcade game. It needs like
NES.
the arcade style treatment of climbing through the vents. I need cutscenes. I need henchmen. All that stuff.
I mean, you get a little bit of that with the NES one, but it's a top-down. You just feel like you're hunting an Oregon Trail the whole time.
It feels like it could be anything. It doesn't feel like Die Hard. That's the thing.
That's true, I think. Yeah.
That's how it always felt to me. The other thing is Blade Runner. Imagine a Blade Runner NES game with all the colors and the androids that are, or I'm sorry, the replicants that are hunting you, or not hunting you, but you have to hunt the replicants, and once they're aware of your presence, you have to freaking get your ass in gear and freaking go after them and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, I think Blade Runner would lend itself well.
It's good. It's a good idea.
Yeah, Blade Runner and Die Hard, and screw the Die Hard NES game because it sucks.
Okay, there you go. There you have it. Next up, we have one from Sean. He says, "Hi. I loved the episode with Dan Hess. I loved listening to him discuss what he was able to do with the limitations of the Nintendo 64. I have two questions for you guys. What are your favorite and least favorite games that you played in 2020? Do you guys have a gaming bucket list? I spent most of 2020 clearing games off my bucket list, and it turned out to be the most enjoyable experience I have had in gaming in quite some time. Mega Man X, Front Mission Gun Hazard, and Rondo of Blood are my favorite games of 2020. Thank you for all the work that you guys put into your channels and this podcast. Signed, Button Masher."
I will say I did play Super Mario 3D Land on the Nintendo 3DS last year in 2020, and that was freaking awesome. I love that game. I also played Mario Sports Superstars, which I really enjoyed the hell out of. I tried to get into what do you call it? Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. It's
a
just
lot.
One of those games where it's just like it takes too much of your time. Yeah. Stuff gets in the way. I have to level up stuff, and I never really got into it. I'm sure I would really like it if I got into it, but yeah. 2020 was about catching up on 3DS stuff that Metroid Samus Returns, of course. I forgot to mention that one. That was one of my favorites too. 2020 was all about catching up on 3DS games, that the absolute best 3DS games that I missed out on. And damn, Mega Man X, Front Mission Gun Hazard, Rondo of Blood, that's a who's who of like games
For sure, yeah.
Like, damn, that is stacked. That is a stacked list. What about you, Trev?
Yeah, I can take this time to plug my other podcast because I did talk about this quite a bit on Polykill. My favorite game that I played in 2020, I'll just say it's the one that I finished just yesterday. That's The Last of Us 2. I know that's not a retro answer for the retro fans that listen to the show, but that game was just remarkable.
Boo!
Just remarkable. Couldn't get it out of my head. I'm still thinking about it, to be quite honest with you. Another game that I liked, which is one that I had some nostalgia for because I played it back in my college days and didn't finish it. That was Dark Cloud 2 on the PlayStation 2. That's a really fun action RPG, if you're into that. Yakuza 0. I'm just naming kind of more modern stuff. I've played a lot of the old school stuff, obviously. Like, I played some Wild Arms 2. I like that quite a bit. I don't really have a game that I didn't like all that much, like least favorite. I usually just stop playing them if they're bad, but maybe Family Dog. I think I did play that as kind of a joke. I did beat it, though.
You and Family Dog, I swear to God.
I had to play it. It was just, you talked down on it so much, I felt like I had to pet the dog. I had to do it.
I know. You have to pet the dog.
I do have a gaming bucket list. So again, plugging Polykill, it's about beating games off the backlog, which is what we do. So it's a big group of game beaters, and we use the community and the games that they beat to fill a few segments of the show. So if you like beating games and you want to participate in that, that'd be good. I do have like a running list of games that I want to beat like in my lifetime, and that includes stuff that comes out new. So it's just an ever-ending burden at this point. But it's fun to do stuff like that.
I think the big one for me is Octopath Traveler. I really want to get into that one. There's a few others like Suikoden. Mm-hmm. I want to get into that series. I want to get into Xenogears. I want to give enough time to those games where I can actually get into them. And Phantasy Star 4, that's another one I want to give a proper replay to. I haven't played it since, oh boy, this is like over 10 years now. I need to get into that again. And there's a bunch of stuff on my quote unquote bucket list that I have. It's mostly time consuming stuff. That's the thing. It's like RPGs and stuff like that.
How do you balance that with the stuff that you were doing for the channel, and do you try to make those things line up as much as possible? Like, I want to play this, so it's going to be the next review, versus maybe it's a game that you've already reviewed, you just want to revisit. Well, it's not going to go back on the channel, so do you put that further back?
You just got to make a schedule, essentially, and it's really hard to do when it's, I've got an actual job, an 8-to-5 job, and here's this game that I want to play, here's this game that I want to play, and here's this game that is a Patreon request, and here's this game that I want to play for fun, and,
yeah,
it becomes a burden eventually when you let it pile up, but you just have to remind yourself that this is for fun. This shouldn't be work.
Exactly.
I really want to get into Octopath Traveler, though. I've heard a lot of really good things about that game.
Speaking of hearing good things from people, we did get to hear from our pal Norm. He's coming up next. You guys know Norm. He's a video game historian. His channel has videos dating back 11 years, which actually surprised me. I didn't realize he'd been around that long. But he just recently crossed the 800,000 subs milestone, so doing good things over there. He's definitely a fixture in the retro gaming YouTube space, and is an obvious stickler for facts and quality, which make his stuff stand out. So he's a good interview. So Norm, thanks so much for coming on Drunk Friend to chat with us. How are things?
Well, all pretty good, all things considered, I guess. The last year has been kind of hectic, so I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Doing wonderful. And again, thanks so much for taking the time to hang out with us. Earlier today when we were kind of chatting a little bit in the Discord, you said that you had one beer left and you were saving it for this podcast. So now I have to ask, what are you drinking?
It's not classy. It is a Hamm's. It is a Hamm's Tall Boy.
I love Hamm's. I was introduced to Hamm's way too late in life.
Hamm's!
Yes!
Oh, man.
Somebody brought over a 6-pack of Hamm's and they were like, I found this beer for $1. And I was like, what? And it's good for super cheap beer.
Dude, I am from St. Paul, Minnesota. And that's where the Hamm's Brewery was established.
Wow.
So Hamm's is near and dear to my heart.
That's awesome.
Love Hamm's, even though it doesn't taste the best. But give me a freaking 6-pack of Hamm's any day.
Any day.
It's all about value.
Value, big time.
Good value beer.
Yes,
that's
I
right.
Totally agree.
I mean, you're doing better than me. I was out of beer. I'm settling tonight for a mango grapefruit seltzer water, so I'm going heavy tonight.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm fully stocked on the seltzer as well. I whatever Costco has is what I buy, and that's I think Polar is what they're stocking right now. So I've got all the Polar seltzers.
Nice.
You guys are more hardcore than me. I got blood orange cider again. So
well, that sounds good.
That does sound good though, actually. Yeah,
it is really good. It doesn't hit you hard, and it's not bad on the stomach, on the tummy. So you're doing just fine. It's not bloating or anything like that. So I appreciate that. I will say, health conscious
for a podcast with a nice sweating glass of beer on the thumbnail. We've disappointed everyone that could be a beer fan so far, but hopefully they're here for some video games and for some Norm. So Norm, let's kick it off. So you're one of the more prominent, documentarian historians in the video game space, and you've seen that meme, how it started versus how it's going, and it looks like it's going pretty well. So how did this all start for you? Do you remember when you had the idea for your channel?
Yeah, I do. It was back in, I want to say, March of 2008. I was a college student. I was 20 years old, and I was majoring in history. Surprise, surprise. And I was working at GameStop while I was in college. So, I was surrounded by video games all the time, and I was studying history, and I said, I want to look into the history of video games. I bet that's interesting. I'd never thought to do that before, and I got inspired from the show Icons on G4. Do you guys remember that show?
Yes.
Yeah,
it was a great show. Kind of like general history of different topics in video games. So they did like Sonic the Hedgehog, and they did the ESRB, and they did like Super Mario and the Dreamcast. And I loved that show, and I said, I want to find more stuff like this. And I went online, and there just really wasn't anything out there. And so I just thought, for fun, well, I'll try it. I'll see what I can do. And that's really how the show started, I guess. I just started it because I thought it would be fun.
So did you ever expect to grow to what it's become?
No, not at all. No. I didn't even know making money on YouTube would ever be a thing, because YouTube started as just this is where you upload videos and share them with your friends.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. This is where you share the old VHS rips that you recorded in the 90s that you want to preserve, I remember this liquid television thing on MTV from 1994 that I want to preserve because the videotape is deteriorating, like that kind of thing.
Exactly.
At least that's what it was for me anyway. Yeah,
I would look up old Nicktoon intros. I'd be like, remember the intro to Rocko's Modern Life, and I'd see if anyone uploaded it. And I mean, that's the stuff we would watch on YouTube when it first started.
That's right. Yeah. For me, it was I would look up. Me and my brother, my older brother, would go look at old CBS NFL on CBS intros from the 70s and 80s, just to listen to the music. And wow, somebody really went balls to the wall with this theme. We'd give our own commentaries to it and stuff like that. And it was a blast. I miss that YouTube. It's become a completely different animal, for better and for worse. But that was the Wild West of 2006-2008 internet/YouTube.
Yeah, and I consider myself very lucky and fortunate that I started when I did, because there just wasn't as many people making content on YouTube. And so I always tell people this, I'm very lucky that I just said, I'm going to try this thing, and I just did it. And it wasn't great when it first started. Looking back at my older stuff, I think I've gotten better over the years, but I do always tell people I'm very lucky that I started when I did. Because I can't imagine starting a channel today. I'm sure it's much, much harder than starting a channel in 2008.
I was going to say that sounds pretty familiar, because that's why I started my thing in 2013. I just wasn't finding the information that I wanted to find on YouTube. So I was unemployed at the time. So I said, fine, I'm just going to make this. stuff about games that I don't know about. I was doing that anyway in my spare time. I was like, what's this game? What's this game? And I was actually taking notes and saving them so I wouldn't have to look up stuff over and over. And it's like, I might as well take advantage of this thing. If I have a way of recording footage, I'll make a video of it, since I went to school for graphic design and I've taken classes on video editing. I know all that stuff. So it's like, I might as well just make videos on it. And yeah, to be sure, the early videos are, for me especially, are very, very rough, to say the least. But yeah, you make a good point where it's like, today it's a pretty saturated thing where there's many established entities, I will say, that kind of have their own niche within a niche, which within retro gaming, and so it must be tough. But at the same time, there are people that come to the surface that kind of they know their stuff and they're really good at what they do. I'm leading to a question about, like, what are some of the YouTube channels that you watch that you're interested in?
When it comes to gaming, I love Ahoy. I don't know if you've watched Ahoy before.
Yes.
He does very, very good, like, long form documentary style content, but he has his own twist with it. Like, his narration's very unique, and he makes his own music, and he does his own graphics, and he's just a very talented man. So I watch Ahoy whenever he puts out a video. I always watch Angry Video Game Nerd because I've been watching James since I discovered YouTube.
Sure. Yeah.
I think it feels like James discovered YouTube at this point. He's been around so long, since like 2006. So yeah, he's a staple. Like, he's a staple of YouTube in general. So yeah,
he is. Yeah, and he was a big inspiration to me. Sure. I mean, just seeing that, there's people that make video game content on YouTube it looks like they're having so much fun doing it, and people are loving it. So he was a big inspiration. So I still watch him. I watch Wrestling with Gaming. He does really good video game history documentaries. Gosh, I have a lot of friends that do YouTube. The Completionist. Me and Gerard have been friends for quite a while now, and I always watch his videos. So I'm sure I'm forgetting people, but yeah, those are a few that I watch. But outside of gaming, I watch a lot of YouTube as well. Like, I love restoration videos where somebody just restores something back to new, but there's no talking in the video. It's just them, like, working on the item. So they'll take, like, an old rusty wrench and they'll make it shiny and new again. And it's fascinating to watch.
Do you ever watch, like, power washing type stuff? Like,
yeah. Power washing porn. That's
yes,
wonderful stuff.
That's my favorite subreddit.
It inspired me to buy a power washer.
I was gonna say, like, it makes me want to own. I've used a power washer before. I used to work at a golf course, and that's what we used to clean the mowers. But man, I never thought to use it, like, on my sidewalk or something like that. And it makes me jealous that those.
I went and visited my grandma last year, and the side of her house was, like, full of this, like, green mildew mold because it hadn't been cleaned in years. And I said, oh my gosh, this is my chance to, like, use a power washer. So I went to my parents who were there, and I said, let's go to Home Depot and let's buy grandma a power washer. And I got to use one, and it was fantastic. It was so much fun.
You just felt like Ghostbuster.
Yeah, so my grandma was thrilled.
Well, yeah, her house got cleaned.
Yeah.
I'm sure you didn't charge her for anything or anything like that.
I didn't charge her much. It wasn't much. No, I didn't charge my grandma.
So I'm curious to ask, though, when you go about researching something, what's the first thing you do? Do you have certain bookmarks that you always make sure to visit? Do you have go-to destinations on the internet, or maybe not on the internet? What's your I hate the question, what's your process? Because it's such kind of it's too broad and generalized. But like, what's the first thing you do when you decide on a subject, I guess?
Well, if it's about a certain game, I always play through the game first, just so I'm understanding the actual topic. But if it's so like with the Mario, I did a video on Mario Paint. I played so many hours of Mario Paint, and it was just like I was drawing stuff, I was learning how to animate, I was trying to make the music, and I just wanted to understand how the program worked, how the game works. And then I dive into the research. I think the first place I always go to is archive.org, because they just have such a massive catalog of like old video game magazines. And so I definitely dive into archive.org first, just to see like how much press something got, what the press was talking about with this certain topic. And then I don't know if you guys are familiar with newspapers.com. I
didn't know that was a thing. I need to look this up right now.
It is for video game research. It is the best money you will ever spend. It digitizes millions of old newspapers, and you can find stuff you would have never imagined. It is a fantastic resource. So I highly recommend any digital newspaper website. There's newspapers.com. There's like Genealogy Bank. There's newspaperarchives.com. They're great resources for research.
That's fascinating to me because I don't remember, at least as a kid, video games getting a lot of coverage in newspapers. It seemed to me they were just kind of brushed aside as like, yeah, well, we'll cover the business end of it. But I remember it wasn't until I want to say, and this is coming from a newspaper dork, that, I read the front to back sports section, of course, but I also went through the whole thing, making sure I didn't miss anything that I would have been interested in. I blame my dad for that. But I don't remember video games getting a ton of coverage in newspapers. But what kind of stuff do you find?
So with my show, the business aspect of some of the stuff is actually really important.
Sure,
to the story. So that's a great resource for me. But I'm thinking like for your show, it would be good for how much did a game cost when it came out? What stores carried the game? There are, believe it or not, there are sometimes like mom and pop opinion piece reviews of video games. So you can see like a down to earth review of Secret of Evermore or something.
I love it. That's what I would love that. That's freaking awesome. Yeah, I definitely got to check this out.
It's a great resource. And actually I'm in grad school right now, and I use it for grad school too. They have newspapers dating back to the Civil War, so it's a great resource to have.
Yeah,
interesting. Is there anything else in terms of where you focus your research? I mean, I know 2020 made it tough, but are you going to like a library and getting out the microfiche, or are you having to do anything like that?
I have done that before. I've been to I'm lucky that there's a National Archives in where I am. I'm in Kansas City. There's a National Archives building here, so I can order records and I can look at records. I was planning to go to the Strong Museum in Rochester last year, but COVID canceled that. But besides that, probably my favorite source of research is interviews, like getting in touch with the people behind these games or events in video game history. And, most people are happy to talk to you, and you get great insight, and you get probably the best information you can on a subject, right? Because they were involved with it.
Right.
So,
yeah, I was going to ask about that because I do a lot of interviews where I work, and it's more like me bugging them about work stuff, and they're not always eager to talk. But you're right, it seems like the interviews that you've done with folks, they seem very eager to talk about the things that they've done. And I thought it was interesting in one of your recent videos where you covered the history of the Mega Man games on PC, you interviewed the guy that was responsible for those games, and it's really no secret to anyone that those games are less than favorable. And you make that point many times in the video. Did you struggle with admitting to the audience, or like saying in the video that the games are bad while also interviewing the guy that put his heart and soul into it? Was there any cognitive dissonance there, or did he kind of understand how that was going to go?
So in studying history, a lot of the times they tell you to don't fall in love with your subject, because it can kind of skew your information, and it will make your history not as good as it could be. And so when you're dealing with somebody who created the game, of course he's in love with the game because he created it. And you have to take that into account. But I tried to make the argument in this video that, yes, it's not a good game. And I think Steven Rosner admits that, yes, it's not a great game. But he tries to make the point that he worked on this game all by himself. Mm-hmm. And so I tried to argue in the video that this was just a fan game. This was a game that a guy made in his spare time, and Capcom was looking for titles to put out, and they, money talks, so let's put out a Mega Man port on the PC, and we don't really care how good or bad it is. And that's really what happened, and I really hope that people can look at those games in a different light, because people look at them and they say, oh, I can't believe they put this out. What were they thinking? Did they play test this? And so in the video, I tried to make that point that there really was no testing phase of these games. They just said, does it run? Yes. Okay, let's release it. And it's Mega Man. It's going to sell. So.
Yeah, you did a good job of that. I do want to make that clear that's how I came. I went into that video thinking these are basically, they have the reputation of the Zelda CDI games. They're just games that you kick around and make fun of. But then at the end of it, I was like, wow, this guy really, that's impressive. The whole story's really impressive. And while I'm not going to play the games, I do have a newfound respect for where they came from. So that point did come through. But I was curious, how that worked with him, if he acknowledged, certainly they're more of a butt of a joke these days than anything else.
Yeah, and I did touch on that with him, and he said it in the video. I think he said they are what they are. He fully admitted that that was one of his first releases that he made. Mm-hmm. So I think he fully admits that it's kind of a joke these days. But I think in a way, Steven Rosner's proud that he put those games out, and that it's part of the Mega Man lore now.
Certainly, yeah.
Even though Capcom doesn't want to talk about them, but the fans know what they are, and that's what's the most important thing, I think.
Yeah, Capcom not talking about them isn't going to stop everyone from asking. So
exactly,
they're cemented in lore as far as everyone else is concerned.
Yeah, and I had to mention this in the video. It's the first Mega Man game with an introduction stage. Because people rave about Mega Man X, that great intro stage, and it's a fantastic intro stage. Mega Man on DOS has a terrible introduction stage, but it is an introduction stage, and it's the first one in the Mega Man series, so got to give it props for that.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned, not falling in love with the subject, and that brings me to this question, which is that one jumping point for me personally when it comes to video game history is how sometimes it feels futile to find out what's real and what's not. My go-to example for this is always Hagane for Super Nintendo, because that has the myth around it that it is a quote-unquote blockbuster rental exclusive, which is complete crap. There's no support behind that at all anywhere, other than two popular people saying it on YouTube, and who cares? But are there any? So I'm curious to ask you: are there any nagging myths in gaming that bother you in particular?
Oh, let me think. I've always been curious. It's funny you talk about Hagane. I'm thinking of Flintstone's Surprise at Dinosaur Peak for the NES. That's always I was always told that was a Blockbuster rental exclusive. Yeah. But I've never seen evidence of that.
Yeah.
No one can ever point to something that says it was a Blockbuster exclusive.
Yet it still goes for like $250, you know,
yeah,
loose
and
on
then
eBay.
and then some people say, "Oh, well, it wasn't a Blockbuster exclusive, but it was a rental exclusive." And so, but I've never seen evidence of that either. So who knows? I've always wanted to like dive into that and figure that out. There are some myths that I've busted. There was always the myth that there was a left-handed Power Glove, like a mythical left-handed Power Glove. But
oh, that's a good one.
When I talked to the guys that made it, they said, "No, we didn't make one. That there's not enough people that are left-handed to warrant us to completely make a new glove." You know, so
interesting.
There is no left-handed Power Glove confirmed.
Nice.
Yeah. I do love looking into those little myths. I mean, the one myth that I've gotten wrong, and this is when I first started making videos, I said Space Invaders caused a coin shortage, which is not true. Now Taito did say yes, it did cause a coin shortage, but
right.
I don't think you can trust Taito on that because, you know, they made Space Invaders. So, of course, they're going to say,
oh,
yeah, it caused a coin shortage. It was super popular.
I was going to say, I think in the Stephen Kent book about video game history, I think he said, and this is one of the first books that I can remember reading about video game history, his book, which I don't remember when this would have been published, like 2001 or 2002.
The Ultimate History of Video Games, I think, was first published in 2001 in some form or another. It might have had a different name, but it's been republished a bunch of times. But yeah, that's where I got that myth from.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Kent does have a lot of errors in his book.
Yes.
But I will say it's a good book in that it does give a really good general overview of the history of the video game industry. And it has a lot of good quotes from industry insiders. And it's a really easy book to read. So I think for like baby's first video game history book, it's a fantastic book. But just proceed with caution because it is filled with a lot of errors.
Yeah, the version I have is one of the first published ones called The First Quarter.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. So he is a really good writer, Stephen Kent, and he's got a lot of great Trip Hawkins quotes in particular. He's the EA guy, and that he really captures that guy's hubris.
The guy that claimed the NES was a fad.
Yes. He gets that guy's, you know, all his, you know, is aura, I will say, in fine form. And I think it's worth a read still, you know, despite you know, the inaccuracies, but
yeah, and a lot of hardcore video game history guys, they despise that book because it really throws out a lot of like factual errors, but I still really like that book. Just for the reasons I said earlier.
Yeah, it was one of the first books it was probably the first book I read about video game history, and it got me even more interested in it, especially because if I remember correctly, he starts with like pinball stuff, like the early pinball stuff that started in like the 40s and 50s and how that came about and that sort of stuff. But
he's writing a sequel now.
Is he really?
He is. I'm very excited. It is coming, I think, this year.
I'm gonna have to definitely gonna have to pick that up. But speaking of which, though, Stephen Kent is in a unique position, and you are in a unique position where you have become a trusted voice of reason in a burgeoning industry that's, you know, still evolving constantly. So when it comes to research, you know, you talk about the Taito thing and the quarter shortage, which is nonsense. But does any of that pressure get to you to get things right all the time, since you know, it's like, oh, suddenly I'm in this position to be, you know, an authority on this kind of stuff? And the reason I ask that is because I have to deal with, you know, me being the SNES drunk channel, all that nonsense. I get the actually comments constantly, and it's well, actually, this it's I hear it in a Simpsons voice, basically, Professor Frank, and it's fine, if you want to point out some pedantic thing. I just do the best I can. That's all I'm just a hobbyist. I do the best I can. I want to talk about stuff I like and that sort of thing. I'm gonna get stuff wrong, but I'm not deliberately deceiving people, but
right.
But with you, does any of that get to you? Does that, how do you deal with that sort of external pressure, so to speak?
Well, it's hard because I think just by the nature of my show, people are much more intense with their scrutiny than with, say, angry video game nerd or something.
Yes.
If the angry video game nerd says, "Oh, the NES came out in America in 1988," let's say it's like a glaring error like that, I don't think people would jump down his throat. Mm-hmm. If I said that, I don't even want to know what would happen.
You better believe, people are.
So I did make a video called "What Facts Did I Get Wrong?" And it was a way for me to tell my audience, I am a human being. I am not perfect. I make mistakes. Historians make mistakes all the time. New information comes out all the time. We are constantly looking back at the past and finding new things and correcting history. But I also want people to understand that history it's about more than just finding facts. A lot of the times finding facts is the easiest part of history. It's really interpreting what happened in the past. That's what history is really all about. And I hope that comes across in the videos. But I also have to strike this balance of, okay, I'm also making a documentary that I want people to find engaging and entertaining. And so a lot of stuff I have to cut from my episodes, because a lot of times I'll get comments like you that say, well, why didn't you mention that this game came out in Serbia in 1992 in February on Groundhog Day or something like that? And I'll say, this isn't like, I'm not an encyclopedia. This is like, I'm telling a story about the past.
Yes.
And so you have to, you have to cut things. I can't just list everything that happened with this game. I mean, and that's really what I try to do with my show. I try to tell a story. I mean, the word story is in history, and that's what I try to do. So going back to your thing about the comments, yes, I do get them a lot, and sometimes they are valid. Sometimes I mess up, and I fully admit when I mess up. But a lot of the times it is comments like that are, well, why didn't you mention this random trivial thing that has nothing to do with the narrative? So it's frustrating, but that's just part of being YouTube, right?
Yeah, the way I interpret some of the comments, like you say, some of them are very valuable and do contribute to the overall conversation about a game or a certain era or a console or whatever. But certain people just have that information in their brains and they find an excuse to use it. And it's like, oh, now's my chance. I get to use this trivial piece of nothing and I get to paste it onto this video.
They've been waiting for that moment for a long time, and of course they're going to take that moment, and I totally get it. So.
And I get it too. Exactly. I was just going to say, I get it. Like I get that sort of thing too. So it's like, my thing when it comes to me, like Jerry Seinfeld has a copy of the Super Nintendo version of SimCity on his bookshelf. For like the first few seasons of Seinfeld. That's my completely, utterly useless, trivial fact about anything ever. And of course, it's about Super Nintendo. But it's one of those things where it's like, why didn't you mention that? Why didn't you, in your review of SimCity, why didn't you mention that Jerry Seinfeld has a copy of? It's like, no.
And you have to say, is that relevant to what I'm talking about here? And usually it's not.
they'll give their laundry list of reasons why they think it's relevant, but ultimately it's not, but yeah, no, I think we're kindred spirits in that regard, where we are comment spirits. Trav, join us in a in a circle of hands here, a virtual circle of hands where
yours are warm. That's weird.
Because Trav gets that stuff too. He's finding out. He's in the fledgling steps of his YouTube channel. I mean, I say that jokingly because he's been doing it for well over a year now with NES games. He's doing wonderful, but it's like he's learning. He's getting to the point where he's well over several hundred views, and he's getting the actually police on his ass. And it's just enough. Okay, we get it. Certain trivial facts about this stuff. It doesn't mean they need to be highlighted.
I will say one of the most important aspects of having a good YouTube video, in my opinion, is good writing. And if you were to mention literally everything about a game, I don't think it would be a very good script.
No, not at all. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah, editing is so important with your writing. Now there are channels that exist that are really good at doing video game trivia stuff. Like Did You Know Gaming? They made their channel all about that. It is Did you know about this? Did you know about this? And it works perfectly because that's what they do.
The guy that comes to mind is Summoning Salt, the speedrun historian, so to speak. He does a wonderful job of telling a story of every, he cuts out the fat and is like, here's how this guy did this. He's got footage to back it up. He does a wonderful job of all his, with all his videos. I think he just did one for Super Mario Brothers 2. And it's a must watch because it's, he somehow puts drama. It's like a TV show that I would watch. I expect commercial breaks when I watch that show.
Yeah, it feels paced that way for sure.
Yeah,
it really does.
His videos are super interesting because he's giving us a window into a world that, honestly, I don't know anything about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know anything about speedrunning. I don't know how it works. I don't know how people do this stuff. But he makes it palatable for people like me. Sometimes I'll get comments that are like, I think Summoning Salt is better than the Gaming Historian. And I say, well, I feel like we're very different shows. I don't know if you could compare Summoning Salt to the Gaming Historian. I love Summoning Salt videos, but I get that comment a lot, and I've never understood that.
It's not an either-or situation.
Yeah, and
you don't have...
I also hate the mindset of YouTube is a competition.
Yeah.
It is not a competition.
No.
One of my favorite quotes is, "A rising tide floats all ships."
Yes.
So if one person is doing well on YouTube with video game history, other people that do video game history will also do well. Everybody wins, because it just raises interest in the subject.
Mm-hmm. What people don't know, I just click on the in YouTube Studio. I click on the other videos your audience watched in the audience tab of YouTube Studio. Yeah. The very first video listed is "There Was a Lock for the NES" by Gaming Historian.
Yes, my greatest video of all time.
And it was a wonderful video because I remember that being a thing when I was a kid, and I was like, you got to be freaking kidding me. Like, why wouldn't they just take the freaking console away and put it in a closet or something?
That's what my mom did.
That's what my childhood friend's mom did too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've got Sega Lord X and LGR and John Riggs and John Hancock and all these other guys. But you're totally right that it's everybody. We all are subject to the next video thing that comes up. It's somebody else,
Well, it's like people think that with the restoration videos I watch, it's not like I'm watching Restoration Channel A and then I discover Restoration Channel B. I'm not going to all of a sudden say I am never watching Restoration Channel A again. I am now only watching Restoration Channel B. Now I'm Have you seen that meme where it's a guy, he's like, wow, 2 cakes? Have you seen that meme
No,
before?
I haven't.
Yeah.
It's a guy, it's about artists, and it says, how fans perceive 2 different pieces of art and how like an artist perceives two pieces of art. Basically the fan says, oh wow, there's 2 cakes here, even though one cake doesn't look as good as the other cake. And so that's kind of how YouTube works. It's like people are just happy to get more content. It's not like they're gonna shun the other channel now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I want to take a step back and ask you probably a question you get asked all the time. And so we're going to ask it here, of course. What is the process for selecting the topics that you cover on the channel? Is it things that you're personally curious about, so you gravitate toward that? Are you trying to make the algorithm happy? What's the mindset?
Sometimes I try to appease the algorithm. So
how dare you?
Yeah, it's weird when you run your own business.
I know, right?
You want to see it succeed.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So for example, before the 30th anniversary of Super Mario Brothers 3, I put out, of the North American release anyway, I put out the story of Super Mario Brothers 3. But so sometimes, I go for the algorithm, but I'd say 90% of the time, I just stumble across something that I think is super interesting and that I want to dive into, and that's how I choose the topic. So with the Homework First lock, I was on the Video Game History Hour podcast with Frank Cifaldi and Kelsey Lewin.
Yeah.
And Kelsey mentioned this lock, and I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, yeah, there was a lock called Homework First. And I Googled it, and I saw the images. There are a few articles about it, and I was just like, I've got to know more about this thing. And that's how I chose that topic, because I just thought it was weird,
Yeah, that's
I love
awesome.
it. That's great.
And then to discover the guy that invented the lock, his dad invented kitty litter, which like revolutionized having a cat as a pet. I'm like, it's a small world. Everything's connected. It's just crazy. This is the stuff I love discovering.
That was a fun fact in that video for sure. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Are there any of your older videos that you wish you could? I mean, you mentioned earlier that your quality's gotten better over time, and that's true for everyone. But is there any topic that you want to revisit because you're like, well, I had less resources back then. I knew a little bit less about what I was doing. Maybe you got a few things wrong. History evolved, and you figured, or you learned some new things. Is there anything you'd go back to and redo if you haven't already?
Yeah. There's 2 videos that I really want to redo. The first one is the Universal versus Nintendo court case about Donkey Kong. That one, I went to the National Archives and I scanned 5 or 6 boxes worth of documents in regards to that court case. So I've just got a ton of new information that's never been seen before.
Oh, wow.
That I think like significantly changes the history of Donkey Kong and how that game was developed. So I'd love to redo that video.
Yes, please do.
That sounds awesome.
I think the original was like 12 minutes long. I don't even want to know how long the new one would be. I'm still going through all the documents because it's just a ton of paperwork. So I'd like to redo that. The other one I'd love to redo is, which actually this video doesn't exist on the internet right now. I did a video about when Nintendo bought the Seattle Mariners.
Oh, yeah.
Back in 1992.
I would love that.
That'd be awesome.
I made that back in 2016, and it was a fascinating story, and I was just amazed at how xenophobic everybody was about that. They were like, there's no way we're going to let a Japanese company own an American baseball team. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of drama and controversy around that. I uploaded that video in, I think, June of 2016. Major League Baseball sent me a cease and desist in the mail.
Wow.
In the mail. Hard copy.
Classic baseball.
And they said, delete the video, delete all mentions of the video, delete all social media posts about the video, or we're going to court. So I did. So I have to remake that video without Major League Baseball footage, because I used some like Seattle Mariners games from the 80s in that video. And, of course, Major League Baseball is super protective of their stuff.
Got to get that express written consent, man.
Yeah, and I tried to work with them afterward. I said, look, let's work out a deal. I really want to make this. I think it's super interesting. And then I figured out how much it would cost, and I said, well, that's not happening. So,
Yikes.
Oh, my God.
I got to figure out a way to remake that.
Well, I'm curious now, when was that scheduled to happen?
That took place in 1992.
92? Early 90s. Okay, that would have been at the height of the hysteria regarding Japanese companies like, they're taking over, we can't let them surpass us, blah blah blah.
Yep. So you learn about Japanese automakers were like, oh my god, they're taking over the auto industry, and they were giving bids for like public transportation systems in California, and like the government was pressured to like drop the bid because it was from a Japanese company. There was a lot of anti-Japanese hysteria going on, but there was also a Japanese politician said American workers are lazy or something like that, and people were flipping out about that too. So a different time.
Yeah.
Very much so,
Yeah, and speaking a little more to your process, I imagine you have a lot of ideas for videos and you chip away at them based on what you're able to access for research. I mean, is it like that, or are you very one at a time? Are you very focused on, this is what I'm doing now, I'll put that on the back burner?
Yeah, most of the time I can do one video at a time, but actually sometimes you run into a roadblock and I say, okay, I have to put this on hold and I have to do something else. So like actually right now, I'm going through it right now. I'm making a video about the U-Force, that NES controller that, you used your hands to control everything. It was very cool and futuristic, and it was going to be the future of video games. I'm at a roadblock because I'm trying to talk to the engineers that made this thing, and I want to talk to them, but I'm running into some issues with that. So
gotcha.
I really try with my videos. I try to say if I can't bring anything new to the conversation, I don't want to put it out there. And so with the U-Force, I'm like, I really want to talk to these guys. I still think it would be a good video even if I didn't talk to them, but I'm hoping I can talk to them. So I'm putting it on hold for now, and I got to find something else to work on. So
that's kind of how I feel, where even if I'm talking about let's give an example here. What's some crap ass Super Nintendo game?
I don't know. You've done
lately?
What, 600 videos of them?
Well, like Brutal Paws of Fury. Like when I go to YouTube, when I go to YouTube, listen. When I go to YouTube and I look up Brutal Paws of Fury, I don't see a whole lot of information about it. I see 20-minute videos with blurry footage of it with like some guy talking through a webcam microphone about it, or like some 2012 video with like some guy like, I got this cartridge at a yard sale, blah blah blah, or something like that. But I just want this to be like the stuff I make, I just want it to be like, here's what this game is, here's what some guy thinks of it, and I keep the editorial stuff to a minimum if I can. I throw in some snark if I can, if the opportunity presents itself. In that case, it usually does, because it's Brutal Paws of Fury. But it's I try and just present the game as like, here's what this is, and I feel like that's useful. So I really appreciate your channel, because you approach it like, is this useful? Is it not useful? And I feel like you're always looking for, is this useful? So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I agree with your method as well. Like you do a search on YouTube for that topic. Like I'd search for the U-Force. I think there's one video about the U-Force that's pretty good. And it's kind of an unscripted video. He just shows it and how it works and like all the different modes. So it's kind of an informational video. But as far as like deep dive information on the U-Force, there's nothing out there. Even the Wikipedia entry is like the most bare bones thing I've ever seen. But the history behind this thing is super interesting. So that's like a motivating factor for making the video. You want people to know more about this.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. The only reason I know U-Force is through two ways. It's through the magazine ads in like GamePro and, you know, all the magazines from back then, EGM, and through Angry Video Game Nerd. I think he did it, you know, he demonstrated it one time.
He used it in his NES accessory video.
Yeah.
And he was shocked that it worked. And I think that's part of the theme of my video is that this thing worked, and it worked pretty well.
Oh,
it just wasn't a very good video game controller. But like it wasn't like the Power Glove. The Power Glove didn't work. Like the technology, you're scaling down a piece of equipment that costs tens of thousands of dollars, and you're scaling it down to a $70 piece of equipment, and so the technology just isn't there yet. But the U-Force used like infrared signals that like remote TV remotes use, and so the technology was there and it worked, but it was expensive, and it's not a great way to play platformers, which was like a majority of the games on the NES. So yeah, but like I was streaming on Twitch last night with the U-Force, and I was playing Punch-Out, and I was like, I thought I was doing pretty good. Like
wow.
It worked.
That's cool.
That is bold. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it was fun.
So you mentioned grad school earlier, and you said you had a history degree already, I believe. Is that what grad school? Is that what you're doing with grad school? Is getting doing more history stuff, or are you branching out?
Yep, I am. I'm going for my master's in public history. So that is public history is sort of a newish field. It is presenting history to the general public, and I feel like that kind of tied in very well with my YouTube channel. So
for sure,
yeah, that sounds like the route I want to go. The other way is just, you know, a general master's in history. That's more of an academic history, which I'm not super into academic history, but to each their own, you know.
So when it comes to other parts of history outside of video games, do you have any interest in that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I grew up, how I got into history was I watched World War II movies. I loved World War II. So I kind of became obsessed with studying World War II. And then I got into the Civil War, a lot of American history, basically. I live in Kansas City. It's where Lewis and Clark, kind of started their expedition. It's where the Oregon and Santa Fe and California trails started, right here. So there's a lot of history in Kansas City that's super interesting. So yeah, I'm really into all of it.
There's a lot of history in Oregon Trail.
There is, and I was fortunate to interview the creators of Oregon Trail back in 2019.
From the MECC or whatever it's called, the Minnesota Educational
Computing Consortium. Or
nice, yeah, I love it. I interviewed Bill Heineman, Paul Dillenberger, and Philip Bouchard. Bill Heineman and Paul Dillenberger, they made the original Oregon Trail, which was back in, I think, 1971. It was a text-based adventure game. Yeah.
And then I interviewed Philip Bouchard, who worked for MECC, and he was the one that made the Apple II version that most of us remember.
Yeah.
And no one has really talked to Philip Bouchard, which shocks me, because he's the guy that made the version everyone remembers.
Yeah.
So I was super fortunate to interview those three guys. I have the footage. I mentioned earlier I was trying to go to the Strong Museum and do research. That's why I wanted to go to the Strong Museum, because they have MECC papers. So I wanted to go there and, look at the documents and learn more about MECC. So, because I was going to make a video about that, but I might hold it because I think it might turn into my master's thesis. So,
awesome!
We'll see.
Dang! Wow!
I might kill two birds with one stone here. It might become a gaming historian video and my master's thesis. So
I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's efficiency right there.
I thought so.
Now I have to ask, did Philip give any hints as to like, okay, you should definitely get wagon tongues and wagon wheels. You should definitely load up on food. I need Oregon Trail's tips and hints because I'm not that good at that game.
I mean, if it's all formula based. I mean, the best if you want to be good at the game, just start the game as a banker because you have so much money. You can just buy everything excess, and then you'll beat the game pretty easily. Mm-hmm, at every river crossing, you can just pay to cross, and you can just restock at every fort. It's super easy when you play as the banker.
I'm a sucker. I play as a farmer.
That's the hardest. If you play as a farmer, it's pretty hard.
Oh, okay. Because I'm like earnest, I want to be a farmer. The game kind of goads you into that. Where I'm just like, I want to be a rough and tumble farmer. I'm gonna caulk the boat every time. Or caulk the cart every time and float it across.
There's something endearing about being the farmer.
Yeah, I guess there is.
Yeah, and I mean, the majority of people that went on the Oregon Trail, a lot of them were poor farmers that just wanted, better opportunities. So I can see why you'd want to be a farmer. Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, the source of my childhood anxiety was that gamble of whether or not the caulking it was going to work, and you just watch it sink, and you're like, oh, God, not now.
Yeah, and I think about caulking back then was probably just like stuffing mud in between the floorboards of the wagon or something.
Yeah, you're not going to Lowe's and buying, caulk.
Yeah, you're not buying the DAP 230 extra sealant or something like that. But the one thing I found funny when talking to Philip Bouchard was, the Oregon Trail merchandise, one of the big selling T-shirts it says "You have died of dysentery."
Mm-hmm. What?
Yeah. You can't actually die of dysentery in that game.
Really?
Yeah.
You can't. Oh, huh.
So Philip Bouchard told me, he said that doesn't actually happen in the game. That might be like a Mandela effect thing.
Weird.
I think so, yeah, because you definitely,
you get cholera all the time.
You can get dysentery.
You can get dysentery. You can get cholera. You can get the hell out of cholera. Mm-hmm. And you can definitely die of a broken leg or a broken arm because it gets infected and all that sort of stuff, especially if a bone is I want them to go into detail here with these, ailments. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but the actual phrase, "You have died of dysentery," is not in the game.
Interesting.
So
that's
like a Mandela effect thing.
I was going to say that's definitely a Mandela effect thing. Yeah. Fascinating.
There's another gaming myth. You just busted it for us.
There we go.
Nice. I love it.
We can source the podcast on Wikipedia.
Yes. We did it, Alex.
High five, man.
Well, Norm, I don't know that we have any other questions, but we do have we have one listener question, and it comes from the guy who reached out for us on our behalf, reached out to you on our behalf to be on the podcast. So we want to thank Seth, a.k.a.
Seth.
Captain Drachma in small circles, yep. He asks, this is for all three of us, what do you think of the mini consoles, and which one do you like the most, or is there one that hasn't come out yet that you'd like to see?
Oh, gosh. I am a sucker for the mini consoles. I think they're very cute, and I think they have a good selection of games on them. I've played. I haven't played the TurboGrafx one yet. I'd like to.
Me neither.
I think the NES one was good. I thought the Super Nintendo one was fantastic. I thought the Sega Genesis one was very good. I personally would love a Game Boy Mini, just like. And just make it like another Game Boy, but just have a bunch of games built into it. I don't know. I think that would be fun.
You stole my answer. I was gonna go with that. That was my answer. But yeah, that would be so freaking cool to have those games rebooted, and you could really cram a ton of games onto there. You could do you
could have a really nice LCD screen, and you could even have the option of like play it in Game Boy Color mode or play it in like old school green and black mode.
Give it a backlight.
give it a backlight so I don't have to, sit under a lamp and play.
Yeah. I knew that was one of your favorite consoles just based on your video, so I'm not surprised you said Game Boy. And I have to fall in line here. I think the Game Boy would be a great one to see. So we might have a unanimous answer here for you, Seth.
I think Game Boy for me. Yeah, I have not so fond, but yet somehow fond memories of waiting for highway lights to shine over my dad's Ford F-150 as I lay in the back seat from my dad's trips to Iowa, dropping my brother off on to college. But yeah, it's got to be the Game Boy. Like I'm just kind of sitting back and waiting. Like
I think Sega is putting out like a mini Game Gear. It's like the tiniest thing I've ever seen.
Oh yeah,
I think they already did.
Yeah, I think I saw some news about that, and they have but I don't think it has a ton of games on it. I think it just has like one game on each, but it's like super tiny.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's playable. It seems like a keychain kind of a thing.
Exactly. Right. And we had a Game Gear growing up, but I didn't really like it. I always preferred the Game Boy. I just thought the games weren't very good on it.
Yeah, and it was like holding a hot cinder block after a while, and you got carpal tunnel, and the batteries lasted about 8 minutes, so you'd get suckered into having fun, and then it would die, and you'd lose everything.
Yeah, the battery life really sucked on it. The best thing about the Game Gear was you could play it in those road trips and at night, and you could still play.
Yeah,
and I thought the Sonic games were pretty good on the Game Gear, but as far as like game selection, I think the Game Boy beats it. Oh yeah,
absolutely. Down. And the Game Boy had a lot more games that I wanted as a kid.
It did, yeah.
For sure. But I remember my childhood friend Dan down the road from me had a Game Gear, and he had Mortal Kombat, the first Mortal Kombat on it, and holy crap. It was Mortal Kombat with blood, with finishers, on a portable device, on a color portable device. Holy crap, that blew my mind. I wanted it so bad. I was so jealous. It was amazing. Sub-Zero.
Yeah, we had that game too, and playing it today, you're like, oh, this is rough. It's kind of sluggish, but man, I played the heck out of the original Mortal Kombat, and I think it was missing some characters too. I think it only had like six fighters. I don't think Kano was in that game.
No, you're right. Yeah. Kano and Sonya Blade, I don't think were in that one. I think it was just Sub-Zero, Scorpion, Raiden, and the usual suspects, and but. Oh, I remember my friend had that, and I was just like, oh my God, this is the next level of gaming right here. It's
this is
portable stuff. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I have a soft spot for the Game Gear, I have to admit.
Yeah, I guess I do too, just because we grew up with it. I mean, but that's how it goes with a lot of consoles,
For sure.
If you grew up with it, you kind of look at it a little differently.
For sure. It's hard to disassociate and look at it objectively.
Yeah, like I love Hard Driving on the Sega Genesis by Tengen. I love that game. It is a objectively bad game.
Oh, God.
I love it because I grew up with it, and I was like, oh my God, I'm driving in first person. This is incredible.
1 frame per second.
Yeah, 2 frames a second, and you do the loop-de-loop, and you can't really tell if you're going to make it or not. And it was great.
You definitely have to see SNES Drunk's Hard Driving review. So
no, yeah, don't look that up because it has nothing to do with the game at all. It has everything to do with very nice and friendly commenters that I get all the time.
It's a good watch. It's a good watch.
Yeah, it's a fun watch, but yeah, don't go out of your way to watch that one. But
I do want to mention I discovered your show, Alex, when I was researching Crusader of Senti.
Oh, yeah. I love that game.
Yeah. So I did a video on it earlier last year, and so I was looking at YouTube videos about it, and your review of it was fantastic. And I said,
Thanks.
wow, I really like that review. So then I watched more reviews, and I said, oh, this is like the style of review that I like. So I'm a big fan of SNES Drunk. And that's why.
Right on. That's so cool. I love hearing that.
And now I have to check out Trav's channel because it's about Nintendo games, right?
Yeah. It's a ripoff of Alex. I just do NES stuff. I'm not afraid to admit it.
Well, the thing is that Trav does stuff on, I really liked his review on Roger Rabbit for NES, for instance, when you talk about Roger Rabbit on NES, you're always going to be like, oh, that game is horrible and blah, blah, blah.
LJN.
Blah, blah. Yeah. Exactly. But Trav really gives it a fair shake. And that Roger Rabbit was one of those games that I ended up renting, or I didn't end up renting myself. I didn't have an NES, but I convinced my childhood friend to rent it, and he did, and we both had immediate regret because we thought we were just getting like a hop and bop platformer, that kind of thing. But Trav does a great job of like deconstructing what that game is, what it does well, what it sucks at. Here's what you do. Here's what it's bad at. That sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So it's a wonderful job at that, and I think it's extremely useful. But thanks for saying that nice stuff about my channel. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
And yeah, here we are, freaking 7 years later, 8 years later, and it's like, what the hell happened? I know. It's like I didn't sign up for all this. I just wanted to like expand my hobby slightly, but holy cow. Wow. But here we are talking to you, Mr. Gaming Historian. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and I've been doing it for 13 years now.
Jeez.
Yeah. So. We're so lucky to have you because you're such a well-informed and you're a great guy. So we appreciate your coming on to this podcast.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone, that's been another Drunk Friend podcast. As always, you can reach out to us with questions or comments at drunkfriendpodcast@gmail.com. We'll respond or read it here eventually. Please head on over to polykill.com if you want to hear more podcasts like this one. There's Petey's Power Hour, Tales of the Lesser Medium, Polykill, and more.
If you're not interested in sending an email, no big deal. Just give us a rating and review on a podcast app of your choice, and that'll help us out big time.
Big time. All right, you can find us all on social media. On Twitter, I'm at Trav Plays Games. Alex is, of course, at SNESDrunk, and you can find Norm at Gaming Historian.
As always, the music you heard in the beginning and can hear right now was composed by our friend Kular. The track you hear is called Electric Star Bounce, and you can find a link to more of his music on the Buzzsprout podcast page. Shout out to Josh Leslie for our thirst-quenching logo.
Be sure to catch us all on YouTube, and thanks for listening.
And we hope you have a great rest of your day. Cheers!